Picture this moment. You're in a meeting and someone tries to one-up you, takes credit for your idea, undermines your contribution. Everyone's watching to see how you'll respond. Will you fight back? Will you compete for dominance? Will you prove you're better? And while everyone expects confrontation, you do something they never anticipated. Nothing. You remain completely unmoved. Not because you're weak, not because you're afraid, but because you've transcended the entire game they're playing. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor who ruled Rome at its peak, understood something that destroys most men. The moment you enter competition, you've already lost. Not the specific contest, but something far more valuable: your peace, your power, your position above the chaos. Because competition requires you to care about outcomes you can't control. It demands you invest energy in proving superiority. It forces you to derive worth from comparison rather than internal standards. And that dependency makes you controllable, manipulable, ultimately weak. The man who refuses to compete isn't avoiding challenge. He's operating on an entirely different level, a level where other people's games become irrelevant, where external validation stops mattering, where your worth comes from alignment with your principles rather than victory over others. And that position, according to Marcus Aurelius, makes you completely untouchable. Not because nobody can hurt you physically, but because nothing they do can disturb your internal state. Think about how most men operate. Someone disrespects them, they must respond. Someone challenges them, they must prove superiority. Someone questions their status, they must defend their position. They're like puppets. Pull the disrespect string, watch them react with anger. Pull the challenge string, watch them scramble to compete. Pull the status string, watch them desperately prove their worth. Marcus Aurelius saw this clearly. These men think they're strong because they fight every battle, but they're actually weak because they can't choose which battles matter. They're slaves to every provocation, servants to every challenge, prisoners of every comparison. Walk into any corporate office, any social gathering, any male space, and you'll see this playing out constantly. Men competing over everything. Who's more successful? Who has the better title? Who makes more money? Who's dating the more attractive woman? Who drives the nicer car? Who has the more impressive physique? It's exhausting, not just to watch, but to participate in, because competition never ends. You win one contest, another appears. You prove yourself superior in one domain. Someone challenges you in another. You establish dominance in one hierarchy. A new hierarchy emerges where you're starting from the bottom. And if your worth is tied to winning these competitions, you're on a treadmill that never stops. Running constantly. Never arriving. Always proving. Never proven. Marcus Aurelius rejected this entirely, not because he couldn't compete. He was literally the most powerful man in the known world. He could have crushed anyone who challenged him, but he understood something profound. Competing requires you to accept someone else's frame, their definition of success, their metrics of worth, their rules of engagement. The moment you enter their competition, you've agreed that their standards matter. You've validated their framework. You've given them power over you, because now your emotional state depends on outcomes in their game. Here's what this looks like in practice. Someone at work tries to make you look bad in a meeting. The competitive response is defending yourself, pointing out their flaws, proving your superiority. The Aurelius response is recognizing that their behavior reveals their insecurity, not your inadequacy. Remaining calm, focused on your actual work rather than workplace theater. Someone questions your decisions publicly. The competitive response is justifying every choice, arguing your position, making them admit you're right. The Aurelius response is understanding that you don't need their approval. Your decisions stand or fall on their own merits. Their opinion changes nothing about the correctness of your choices. Someone tries to outdo you socially, tells bigger stories, claims more impressive achievements, seeks to diminish your status by elevating theirs. The competitive response is matching their energy, telling your own impressive stories, proving you're equally or more accomplished. The Aurelius response is seeing through the entire dynamic, recognizing that people who need to compete for status are advertising their lack of genuine confidence. remaining grounded in who you actually are rather than who you can prove you are. Notice the pattern. Competition requires constant external validation. The refusal to compete requires only internal alignment. Competition makes you reactive. Refusal makes you sovereign. Competition gives others power over your emotional state. Refusal keeps that power internal. Think about the people you genuinely respect most. Not the loudest, not the flashiest, not the ones constantly proving themselves, but the ones who seem completely unaffected by others' opinions, who remain calm regardless of circumstances, who don't need to win every interaction, who seem to operate by different rules than everyone else. Marcus Aurelius identified this quality as the mark of the philosopher, not someone who studied philosophy, but someone who lived it, someone whose internal state remained constant regardless of external circumstances, someone who couldn't be manipulated through pride, provoked through insult, or controlled through competition. Here's the mechanism that makes this so powerful. When you compete, you reveal what you value. You show everyone exactly what matters to you. And once they know what matters to you, they know how to control you. Want to manipulate a competitive man? Challenge him in the domain he's competitive about. Watch him predictably respond, invest energy, prove himself, dance to your tune. But the man who refuses to compete gives you nothing to work with. You challenge him, he doesn't engage. You insult him, he remains unmoved. You try to provoke him, you get nothing back. He's like trying to fight smoke. There's nothing solid to grab onto, nothing to leverage, nothing that gives you power over him. This drives competitive people insane, because their entire framework depends on others playing the same game. When someone refuses to compete, it invalidates their whole approach. It reveals that the game they're taking so seriously is actually optional, that the standards they're killing themselves to meet are arbitrary, that the hierarchy they're desperately climbing is imaginary. Watch what happens when a genuinely non-competitive person enters a competitive environment. First, the competitive people try to pull them in. They issue challenges, they question competence. They create situations designed to force competition. When that doesn't work, they try mockery. They call the non-competitive person weak, scared, avoiding competition because they'd lose. When that doesn't work, something interesting happens. The competitive people start feeling uncomfortable because the non-competitive person's presence reveals something they don't want to see, that all their competing, all their proving, all their status seeking is a choice, not a necessity, and they're choosing it because they're insecure. Marcus Aurelius understood this dynamic at the highest levels of power. As emperor, he was surrounded by people trying to compete for his favor, his attention, his approval. Senators proving their eloquence, generals proving their martial prowess, philosophers proving their wisdom, everyone competing constantly, and he saw through all of it. These people weren't confident, they were desperate. They weren't strong, they were needy. They weren't superior, they were enslaved to external validation. The more they competed, the more they revealed their internal weakness. Here's where this becomes practically applicable to your life. Every competition you enter diminishes you. Not because competing is inherently bad, but because most competition is about ego rather than growth. It's about proving rather than improving. It's about status rather than development. Think about why you compete in the domains where you compete. Are you competing because the activity genuinely serves your growth? Or because you need to prove something? Are you competing because you love the challenge? Or because you fear being seen as less than? Are you competing because winning advances your actual goals? Or because losing threatens your self-image? Most competition falls into the second category. It's not about genuine growth. It's about ego protection. And ego protection makes you weak, not strong. Here's what changes when you stop competing for ego reasons. First, you reclaim massive amounts of energy. Competition is exhausting, constantly proving yourself, constantly measuring yourself against others, constantly defending your status. When you stop, that energy becomes available for actual growth, actual creation, actual achievement. Second, you become immune to manipulation, because manipulation works through emotional triggers: pride, fear, comparison, jealousy. When you're not competing, these triggers stop working. Someone tries to make you jealous, you're genuinely happy for their success. Someone tries to provoke your pride, you have no need to prove superiority. Someone tries to threaten your status, you don't derive worth from status. Third, you develop genuine confidence, not the fragile confidence that comes from winning competitions, but the unshakable confidence that comes from internal alignment. You know who you are. You know what you value. You know what you're building. And other people's opinions become completely irrelevant to that knowledge. Marcus Aurelius called this the inner citadel, the fortress of self that cannot be breached by external circumstances. Most men never build this. They're constantly vulnerable, constantly reactive, constantly at the mercy of whatever challenge, insult, or comparison comes their way. But the man who refuses to compete builds this citadel brick by brick. Every time he doesn't react to provocation, every time he doesn't engage in pointless competition, every time he stays aligned with his principles despite pressure to compete, he's building walls that nothing can penetrate. Think about the practical implications in different domains. In business, most entrepreneurs compete on visibility. Who has more followers? Who gets more press? Who seems more successful? The Aurelius approach is competing on actual value creation, building something genuinely useful, serving customers genuinely well, creating actual results rather than the appearance of results. In relationships, most men compete for female attention. Who can attract the most attractive woman? Who can get the most dates? Who can prove their desirability through conquest? The Aurelius approach is building genuine connection with someone compatible, not because she validates your status, but because the relationship serves mutual growth. In fitness, most men compete for appearance. Who has the most impressive physique? Who can lift the most weight? Who looks best shirtless? The Aurelius approach is training for actual health, functionality, longevity, not because of how it looks, but because of how it serves your life. Notice the shift. From external validation to internal alignment, from proving to improving, from image to substance. What city are you watching this from? Because regardless of location, you're surrounded by men trapped in competitive frameworks that make them miserable, constantly comparing, constantly proving, constantly seeking validation through winning contests that ultimately don't matter. And maybe you're one of them. Maybe you've structured your entire life around competitions you never consciously chose to enter. Maybe your worth is tied to outcomes you can't fully control. Maybe you're exhausted from constantly proving yourself. Here's what Marcus Aurelius offers: permission to stop. Not permission to be lazy, not permission to avoid challenge, but permission to stop deriving worth from comparison, to stop needing to prove superiority, to stop organizing your life around competitions that don't serve your actual growth. This doesn't mean becoming passive. It means becoming selective, choosing challenges that genuinely develop you, rather than accepting every challenge thrown your way, pursuing goals that align with your values, rather than goals that prove status, measuring yourself against your potential, rather than against other people. Here's the transformation that happens when you actually implement this. People start treating you differently. The competitive ones initially try harder to provoke you. When that fails, they start respecting you. Not because you proved superiority, but because your unshakable calm reveals strength they recognize but can't articulate. Your relationships improve dramatically, because you're no longer relating through competition. You can genuinely celebrate others' success without feeling threatened. You can collaborate without worrying about who gets credit. You can be vulnerable without fearing it will be used against you. Your work becomes more effective, because you're focused on actual results rather than appearance of results. You're creating genuine value rather than competing for recognition. You're building something real rather than something impressive. But here's the deepest shift. You discover who you actually are beneath all the competition. Most men never know this. Their entire identity is built around competitive achievements. Take away the wins, the status, the external validation, and there's nothing underneath. They're hollow. Marcus Aurelius understood that the refusal to compete forces you to develop actual substance. Because you can't rely on external validation. You can't hide behind competitive victories. You can't mistake status for worth. You have to develop genuine character, real principles, actual values, and build a life aligned with those things rather than a life designed to impress others. This is uncomfortable initially, because it means confronting the possibility that much of what you've achieved was about ego, rather than genuine growth. That many of your goals were about proving, rather than becoming. That significant portions of your identity are built on sand. But that discomfort is the price of freedom. Freedom from needing others' approval. Freedom from constant comparison. Freedom from the exhausting treadmill of competitive validation. Think about what your life would look like without competitive motivations. What would you still pursue? What goals would remain important? What activities would you still engage in? Those answers reveal what actually matters to you. Everything else is ego. Everything else is competitive framework you've internalized. Everything else is someone else's definition of success that you've mistaken for your own. Marcus Aurelius stripped away all of this. As emperor, he could have competed for legacy, for being remembered as the greatest ruler, for building the largest empire, for crushing the most enemies. Instead, he focused on internal development, on philosophical growth, on ruling justly according to principles, on being the kind of person his principles demanded. And paradoxically, that made his legacy far more enduring than the competitive emperors who sought fame through conquest. Here's what makes the non-competitive man untouchable. You cannot hurt someone who doesn't need your validation. You cannot provoke someone who doesn't care about proving superiority. You cannot manipulate someone who derives worth internally rather than through comparison. You cannot control someone who's completely aligned with their own principles regardless of external pressure. This is true power. Not the power to dominate others, but the power to remain undominated. Not the power to win competitions, but the power to make competitions irrelevant. Not the power to control circumstances, but the power to remain internally constant regardless of circumstances. Most people mistake power for the ability to impose your will on others. But Marcus Aurelius knew real power is the ability to maintain your internal state regardless of what others do. That's why he's remembered as a philosopher king, while competitive emperors are forgotten footnotes. He built something internal that couldn't be destroyed, while they built external empires that crumbled. Here's the practical application for modern life. Stop accepting competitive frames. When someone tries to make an interaction about who's superior, refuse to engage. Not defensively, not by arguing that competition is wrong, but by simply remaining focused on your actual goals rather than their game. Stop measuring yourself through comparison. Your worth isn't determined by being better than others. It's determined by alignment with your potential and principles. You could be the best in the world at something and still be a failure if that thing doesn't serve your actual values. Stop seeking external validation. Every time you pursue approval, you give others power over you. Every time you need recognition, you make yourself controllable. Every time you compete for status, you reveal vulnerability. Start building the inner citadel. Develop principles you won't violate regardless of circumstances. Create standards you measure yourself against. Build a life aligned with your actual values rather than impressive by others' standards. This is hard, because competitive frameworks are everywhere. Social media is designed to make you compare. Workplaces are structured around hierarchies. Social groups operate through status games. Opting out requires constant conscious choice, constant redirection of attention, constant refusal to engage in games everyone else is playing. But the payoff is worth it, because while everyone else is exhausted from competing, you're building something real. While everyone else is anxious about status, you're peaceful in alignment. While everyone else is manipulable through ego, you're untouchable through principle. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily. Reading his meditations, you see him constantly reminding himself, don't get drawn into others' games. Don't compete for recognition. Don't derive worth from comparison. Stay aligned with principles, remain internally focused, build the citadel. He needed these reminders because the pull toward competition is constant. Even as emperor, even as philosopher, even with complete intellectual understanding, he still felt the temptation to compete, to prove, to seek validation, but he recognized those temptations for what they were: weaknesses, vulnerabilities, threats to the internal citadel he was building, and he refused them. Not perfectly, he was human, but consistently enough that his internal state remained largely unaffected by external chaos. Think about the specific competitive frameworks you're trapped in right now. Maybe it's career competition, constantly comparing your progress to peers, feeling behind when others advance, feeling threatened when others succeed. The Aurelius approach is focusing on whether your work aligns with your values and develops your potential. Other people's progress becomes irrelevant. Maybe it's social competition, worrying about status, trying to be seen with the right people, feeling inferior around higher status individuals. The Aurelius approach is building genuine relationships based on mutual respect rather than status trading. Social hierarchy becomes irrelevant. Maybe it's physical competition, comparing your body to others, feeling inadequate around more muscular guys, training primarily to look impressive. The Aurelius approach is training for health, functionality, longevity aligned with your actual goals. Others' physiques become irrelevant. Notice the pattern. Aurelius' approach makes external comparisons irrelevant, not by denying they exist, but by grounding your worth in something internal that comparison cannot touch. Here's what happens as you develop this. Initially, people think you're arrogant, because refusing to compete looks like thinking you're above competition. Let them think that. Their interpretation reveals their framework, not yours. Then people start testing you, trying to provoke competitive responses, issuing challenges, creating situations designed to force you into their game. Stay unmoved. Every test you pass without engaging strengthens the citadel. Eventually, people start respecting you, even the competitive ones. Because your refusal to compete from a place of genuine centeredness rather than fear creates a presence that commands respect. Not demanded respect, not competed for respect, but naturally emerging respect that comes from recognizing genuine strength. And finally, you become untouchable, not because you've defeated all challengers, but because you've made challenge irrelevant. Not because you've proven superiority, but because you've transcended the need to prove anything. Not because you've won all competitions, but because you've stopped playing the game entirely. This is what Marcus Aurelius achieved. The most powerful man in the world who didn't need to prove power. The most accomplished who didn't need to display accomplishments. The most successful who didn't measure success through comparison. And that combination made him genuinely untouchable. You can achieve the same thing, not the same external circumstances. You're probably not becoming emperor, but the same internal state, the same immunity to provocation, the same freedom from competitive frameworks, the same untouchable quality that comes from complete internal alignment. Here's the practice. Daily, ask yourself these questions. What am I competing in that doesn't serve my actual growth? Whose validation am I seeking that I don't actually need? What would I still pursue if nobody ever knew about it? Those questions cut through competitive fog. They reveal what's genuine versus what's ego. They show where you're building substance versus where you're building image. Then, act on those insights. Stop one competitive behavior. Refuse one provocation. Choose one action based purely on internal alignment rather than external validation. Small steps, repeated daily, building the citadel brick by brick. Marcus Aurelius didn't become untouchable overnight. He built that quality through years of practice. Years of choosing principles over pride. Years of refusing competitions that didn't serve growth. Years of remaining aligned despite constant pressure to engage in games that would diminish him. You can do the same, starting today. Starting with the next competitive framework you encounter. Starting with the next provocation you refuse. Starting with the next choice you make based on internal alignment rather than external validation. The man who refuses to compete becomes untouchable, not through avoiding challenge, but through transcending pointless competition, not through weakness, but through strength so complete it doesn't need proving, not through isolation, but through internal alignment so solid that external chaos cannot disturb it. This is available to you, not someday, right now. Through the choice to stop competing in games that don't matter, through the discipline to stay aligned with principles that do, through the courage to build something internal that external circumstances cannot destroy. Marcus Aurelius showed the way. 2,000 years ago. The path hasn't changed. The choice remains the same. Compete for external validation and remain forever vulnerable. Or build internal alignment and become genuinely untouchable. Right now, type these exact words in the comments. I build from within, not for applause. Write it out, because putting those words out there starts shifting your identity. You're declaring that you measure yourself by internal standards rather than external validation. You're joining men throughout history who've made the same choice, who've refused to compete in games that diminish them, who've built citadels that external chaos cannot penetrate. When you write that phrase, you're marking a turning point, from competitive to sovereign, from reactive to principled, from externally validated to internally aligned. Subscribe to this channel right now, because you're committing to philosophy that creates genuine strength, rather than the appearance of strength. You're choosing wisdom that builds substance over tactics that build image. You're investing in understanding that makes you untouchable, rather than strategies that make you impressive. Subscribing means you're serious about transformation at the deepest level. Hit that like button, because this perspective needs to reach men trapped in competitive frameworks that make them miserable. Men exhausting themselves, proving superiority. Men deriving worth from comparison. Men who need to discover that freedom lives on the other side of competition. Your like pushes this to someone who needs it today. Someone competing in games that don't serve them. Someone seeking validation they don't need. Someone ready to discover what untouchable actually means. The next video goes even deeper into Stoic power. There's another principle Marcus Aurelius understood about why most men remain weak despite appearing strong. Why the things you think make you powerful actually make you controllable. Why what you're protecting is what's destroying you. That revelation transforms everything. Because once you see what's actually making you vulnerable, you gain the power to become truly formidable. Not through what you add, but through what you release. Not through what you prove, but through what you transcend. Watch for it.